The box in his hands felt heavier than it should have, though it held only a plant, a framed photo, and 11 years of his life reduced to cardboard. Daniel Cross stood on the marble steps of the building he had once run, his phone pressed to his ear, and in a voice that trembled with something far more dangerous than anger, he said 3 words that would end careers before lunch: fire every one of them. Behind him, on those same steps, 3 people he had trusted laughed like children who had just gotten away with something. They did not know yet what he knew. They did not know who was listening. They only knew that Daniel Cross, the man who built Ashcombe Logistics from a garage into a 9-figure company, had just been walked out by security while they pointed and jeered like he was the punchline of a joke they had been telling for years. If you believe people deserve a second chance, and that quiet men should never be underestimated, hit like, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, because this story is about to remind you that karma keeps better records than any spreadsheet ever could. 6 months earlier, Daniel had been a different man, or at least he told himself he was. His wife had passed 2 years prior, leaving him with a 7-year-old daughter named Lily and a company that no longer felt like his own after the board brought in outside investors. He had poured everything into keeping both alive, the girl and the business, often at the cost of sleep, friendships, and the version of himself who used to laugh easily. Every morning he packed Lily's lunch with a note tucked inside, and every evening he came home late enough that the note was the only conversation they'd had all day. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself the sacrifice would be worth it once things stabilized. What he didn't see, because he was too busy trying to survive, was the slow erosion happening around him. Marcus Webb, his COO, had spent a year quietly courting the new investors, feeding them doubts about Daniel's leadership, painting exhaustion as incompetence and grief as weakness. Priya Chen from finance and Rebecca Hall from operations had joined him, not out of malice at first, but out of ambition, the kind that convinces good people to do small unkind things until the small things become a pattern too large to undo. They had watched Daniel stretch thin between fatherhood and leadership, and instead of offering help, they had offered his name to the board as the reason the company was struggling. The termination meeting lasted 4 minutes. No severance discussion, no thank you for 11 years, just a folder pushed across the table and a security escort waiting outside the door. Daniel had walked past his own name still on the building directory, past employees who wouldn't meet his eyes, and out onto the steps where Marcus, Priya, and Rebecca stood waiting, not to console him, but to witness it, to make sure it was real. Rebecca had laughed first. Then Priya. Then Marcus had pointed at him like he was a stray dog being shooed off a lawn. They had no idea that the phone call Daniel made in that moment wasn't to a lawyer or a friend. It was to Eleanor Voss, the reclusive founder of Meridian Capital, the very investment group that had funded Ashcombe's expansion 5 years earlier under a silent partnership agreement almost no one at the company knew existed. Eleanor was not just an investor. She was Daniel's late wife's aunt, a woman who had watched him grieve, watched him raise Lily alone, and watched him give everything to a company that had just thrown him away like garbage. When Daniel told her what happened, his voice cracking not from anger but from exhaustion, Eleanor didn't ask questions. She simply said she had been waiting for a reason. Within 72 hours, Meridian Capital exercised a clause buried deep in the original funding agreement, a clause that gave them emergency governance rights if leadership changes occurred without board consensus. Marcus had never read that far into the contract. He had been too busy planning his ascension to notice the trapdoor beneath his own feet. By Thursday morning, an emergency board session convened, and by Thursday afternoon, Marcus Webb, Priya Chen, and Rebecca Hall were escorted out of the same building, past the same directory, down the same marble steps, this time with no one laughing. But this story was never really about revenge, and Daniel knew that better than anyone. The night after his termination, he sat on the floor of his living room, still in his suit, box unopened beside him, while Lily crawled into his lap and asked why he looked so sad. He told her the truth, that sometimes people who are supposed to be on your side aren't, and that it hurts more than almost anything. Lily, with the simple wisdom only children seem to carry, told him that when kids at school were mean, her teacher said the best revenge was becoming someone even better. Daniel held his daughter that night and realized she had just given him more clarity than any board meeting ever had. He didn't return to Ashcombe as CEO, though the board begged him to. Instead, he asked Eleanor to help him start something smaller, something built around the values the old company had lost along the way. He named it Lilly & Co., a logistics firm with an unusual policy. Every employee received real family leave, real mental health support, and a culture where struggling was met with help, not humiliation. Within a year, dozens of Ashcombe's best employees, the ones who had quietly respected Daniel all along, left to join him. Even some who had watched him get fired that day and said nothing found the courage to apologize and ask for a second chance themselves, a request Daniel never once denied, because he understood better than anyone what it meant to need one. Marcus, Priya, and Rebecca never fully recovered their reputations. Word travels fast in